German people, average people, and they all know that the United States is no longer the dominant player. So it seems to me that America is really moving toward isolationism. At the same time, you have the Greenland thing. By the way, the Greenland thing, it seems to me, from what you have said, it's a repeat of Monroe Doctrine.
Yes.
Anyway, so
Yes.
so America is retreating. Do you see that America may be returning to its roots of isolationism, perhaps because of mistakes overseas, plus maybe more important, domestic problems? What is your take on that?
The U.S. Actually was never really isolationist. So it's important to understand a little bit of the U.S. history. Remember, the U.S. started as a sliver of the eastern seaboard of the United States, of the North American continent. So the mission of the United States from the beginning was expansion. The U.S. has always been an expansionary force. It was never isolationist. But for the first 100 years, the expansion was across the continent of North America. That was imperialism, because there were many indigenous nations all across, and there was the Spanish, of course. And so the United States built an empire across North America. It wasn't called an empire, but it was effective. And it basically, by the way, unlike other empires, they didn't incorporate the nations, they destroyed them. So the U.S. was more genocidal than anyone else. The demographics were much more in favor of the United States rather than the native populations, which were beset by many demographic woes. And the U.S. exterminated virtually many of these populations. Okay, as soon as the U.S. reached the Pacific Ocean, it started its overseas imperialism. So there wasn't a break. There was expansion from the beginning. And as soon as we usually put the date 1890 as the end of reaching the Pacific, then came toppling Hawaii and beginning the empire in Hawaii. Then in 1898, on completely hokey circumstances, weapons of mass destruction in Havana Bay, we went to war with Spain because they said Cuba is just ripe for dropping into the American empire, and we took Cuba and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. So that was the beginning of the American empire overseas. So I don't think that the U.S. was ever isolationist. In the 1920s, by the way, the Senate rejected America's membership in the League of Nations, and sometimes historians say that was American isolationism, but that was actually the opposite of isolationism. The opposition of Henry Cabot Lodge, who led the Senate revolt against the League of Nations, was that it would limit American discretion. We are an empire, and we will not be beholden to an international institution. So Henry Cabot Lodge was an imperialist who opposed the League of Nations because it called for international co-responsibility, and he didn't want that. He wanted American right of maneuver. After World War II, Roosevelt had a much more collective security vision, but we became the security state, and as I explained, our foreign policy was definitely interventionist, but usually in regime change operations and many wars of choice. So the U.S. is not isolationist, but it never, it didn't take on European powers until the 20th century, when it was, it had become the biggest economy, and until several weeks ago, it didn't acknowledge any limits to its power. Now the question that we're asking is, given that Trump has acknowledged the limits of American power vis-a-vis Russia, will he do the same vis-a-vis China? I think the answer is probably yes. Then what will America do? It still has its expansionary fervor. It will try to beat up its neighbors in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a more limited version of imperialism, which is Canada, Panama, Greenland, too good to ignore, too easy to take. Of course, not really so easy as Trump thinks. The world is not quite as lawless. God help us if it becomes that way, but it's not as lawless as Trump imagines in his mind. This is not a real estate play in Midtown New York. This is the real thing, and Canada's not going down quietly. And my student, Mark Carney, who's now Prime Minister of Canada, said today, no, Canada remains Canada, don't even think about it. And I believe him, and I think he's going to probably remain Prime Minister also in view of the upcoming psychological warfare that's going to come. So can America learn to play by the rules? That's a good question. You know, this rule-based order only likes